Good evening, I'm Marty Owings, and we're live here at the Capitol, and I'm joined tonight by Representative Kelly Fenton, who represents Woodbury. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me tonight.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for coming on, and I appreciate you being our guest tonight. So right out of the gate, let's just talk a little bit about, you've been up here for a couple weeks now, session just started. It's going to be a short session, it's a budget year. Tell me a little bit about what the GOP priorities are for the session in your mind.
So I will just make one correction, it's bonding year. So
Right, okay, bonding I thought it was a budget year this year, because did we miss bonding one year? We didn't do it, now I'm all mixed up.
So you're all mixed up. So it is a bonding year, but for me personally, I have a few priorities I've been working on. One is a great bill we had a hearing for today in education policy related to expanding and strengthening our teacher licensure laws and in terms of who
You beat me to the punch. I was going to get to that, but first I wanted to know if you just knew the collective GOP strategy for what you're going to go after.
Well, I mean, certainly. So it is a bonding year. We need to look at our investments there and how much that might be, or if we will put forth a bonding bill. I mean, there was a significant bonding bill that we did pass at the end of last year. I think we're going to have to really look at tax conformity given the federal tax laws that have changed now. So we'll be looking at some tax conformity. So.
Can you talk about that a little bit? So what you're referring to is President Trump's tax changes and how to bring that into alignment with Minnesota law? Is that essentially it?
Yeah, that essentially we're going to have to look at tax conforming to the federal law, making it simpler to file our taxes here in Minnesota.
Sure.
Also doing what we can to make sure that our Minnesota citizens can keep as much of their hard-earned dollars in their own pockets. And so we're looking at those kind of measures as well. So, MNLARS, we need to really work on fixing that. Minnesota can do so much better. So those are some of the things that we'll probably see in this short session.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about you now. You have an education background. You went to school to be a teacher, I think, and we've talked before. You've been on the show before, I think, once, early on.
Okay.
Yeah, and tell me a little bit about your experience teaching.
So I actually have quite extensive background related to education as a whole. I've probably served in almost every role one can serve in as a school. I was a teacher. I was an elementary school teacher. Okay.
What grade?
I taught 2nd and 5th predominantly. And I will tell you that 2nd grade is my favorite grade ever to teach, because at the beginning of the year the kids are still like 1st graders, and when they leave at the end of the year they're more like 3rd graders, so you see so much growth in that year. But I'm also was a school administrator. So I went on to get my degree in a Master's of Administration Supervision of Schools. Was a school administrator in the state of Texas. I've been a substitute teacher, I've been a parent of 3 children, and a Sunday school teacher as well.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. Compared to the House floor and then the 2nd grade class, which is more rambunctious in your mind?
Oh, I'd have to say the House floor for sure. Absolutely.
I mean,
absolutely.
Maturity level about equal sometimes, right? In an election year?
But we have so much fun. It's great camaraderie when we're on the House floor.
Yeah, I'm sure. You missed the Rukavina years. I think you would have loved those years.
I was not here, but I've heard many stories.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah.
All right, so you've introduced a couple of bills. I think one last session, and I don't know what you're going to do with this session, but we'll get into the details. Okay. But one of the bills like if I just asked Chelsea, who's here tonight, like if she thought there was a law against police officers having sex with people in custody, you would probably think there's already a law for that, right?
I would, yeah.
Yeah. And you would too, right? I'm talking to my producer. But apparently there's not, and you introduced a bill to make that a criminal act, right? Makes sense.
That is absolutely correct. And I became alerted from a story that happened in New York. And it was an 18-year-old that was arrested, and upon her arrest, she claimed that she was raped. And the officer in New York said, no, it was consensual. So out of this story then was a study looking at what are the state laws. And it was found that there are many states in which there is no law against that.
Were you surprised? What was
shocked.
your... Yeah.
I was shocked to find out that Minnesota was in fact one of those states. So I took this study and I sent it to the reviser. I'm like, I mean, is this really true?
Right.
I don't always believe the stories I read from this news source, but is this in fact true? And the reviser said, unfortunately, it is.
Yeah.
I said, absolutely. Let's close that loophole. And, you know, I talked to some of my friends in law enforcement because I do appreciate the hard work that our police officers do.
Sure.
I do support our law enforcement, but
let's draw the line.
Let's draw the line. Let's make sure that it is clear and concise that if you arrest someone, you are a person of authority, and this should not happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's rules about doctors, lawyers, psychiatrists, counselors, all this stuff. You'd think it'd be. Certainly there is on legislators. I think there's some law about that.
And we will see too, probably some law changes regarding teachers and students
we're going to get
at
into
the
that
same time.
But let's talk about this bill a little bit. It's 3371. Does it have a fiscal note? Where is it at in the process? How's it moving forward?
So I just dropped the bill. The bill just got its bill number. So we'll go through the process for the other thing. Currently there is no fiscal note. I don't anticipate that there would be a fiscal note to this. Right. We're just changing statute to make it a criminal offense for a peace officer to have sexual relation with someone in their custody.
Yeah, good. And you've got some co-sponsors from the Democrat side on this bill.
I believe I may have.
Okay.
Some people have requested to be on it.
Yeah, I saw some, but I'm not sure if they're all collected in there yet or not. But okay, good. Well, I wanted to make sure we talked about that because I think people would be surprised to find out that's not already a law. I mean, you must have been mortified when you realized, wow, what the heck?
I was shocked.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe Minnesota is so much better than that.
Right.
Again, I don't think I have not heard stories that it is occurring here, but I want to make sure that if it ever does, that there are criminal penalties for that.
Of course, yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about alternative licensure because you've kind of been on the tip of the spear with that. I know you're as an assistant majority leader, you probably take up some of these bills, and you're on the education committee, right? Are you the chair of that committee?
I was on education committee in my first term here.
Right.
I am not on the education committee in my second term. However, that is my wheelhouse. When I was in school administration in the state of Texas, I worked in the alternative certification program, and so I do carry the bills. We call them non-conventional pathways to teacher licensure. Right. Here in Minnesota, I have successfully carried many of those bills and had them signed into law by our governor, and great things are happening. We're recruiting more teachers of minority status, teachers of color, getting them in these classrooms, working hard to try to close our achievement gap. Yeah.
Of course, that's not the only formula to closing the gap, but let's talk about it. It's hard to get teachers, like people with life experience, actual, like a scientist, to move from his job to being a teacher. And then you don't want to send them to have to take a master's degree and then pass all the tests to be a teacher. The alternative licensure or pathway to that, I think your intention originally when we spoke was to simplify all that, to make it easier for someone in business or construction or whatever to get into teaching.
So one of the reasons that we started the program in the state of Texas was because we had a severe teacher shortage. It was also a time that the economy was in a bust. So we went to companies that were laying off and recruited them to be in our classrooms, and then intense educational programs in the evening. So that's how I came about on that. But Minnesota is getting close. I mean, they're already experiencing a shortage in greater Minnesota. It's moving its way into the urban core. We need to get ahead of this before we have that shortage, because that's a crisis. That's a complete education crisis.
Yeah.
You know, one of the bills too that's a little bit different is the Grow Your Own program. So it's a non-conventional pathway to teacher licensure. Yeah. What we're doing there is identifying people that are already working in our schools that would love to be able to teach in the classroom, and we're putting them in the classroom with a mentor teacher for a year while they do their educational courses, and at the end of a year and passing the requirements, they then would have their own classroom. We've had a lot of success with that program as well.
Yeah, good. Yeah, it's I think there's a lot of bipartisan support for that. I think on one of your bills I saw Representative Mariani was on it.
They're always, I've had great, one thing I try to do down here is always find people across the aisle to support the initiatives that I carry forward. Always on the Grow Your Own programs, on the non-conventional pathways, I've always had great bipartisan support of those bills.
Yeah, sounds good. You guys don't ever get the like the medicinal marijuana and the Grow Your Own bills confused, because there's some. I mean, just some.
Definitely
obvious,
not.
Okay.
No, definitely not.
Crossover.
No, you're not allowed to grow your own on the medicinal marijuana.
Right, but I mean,
no, there's no confusion there.
It's a slippery slope, Representative Fenton.
Yeah.
So, what do you think about like pay equity when it comes to? You mentioned there being a shortage, and obviously, pay has something to do with that. I know some of that's controlled by the Minnesota Teachers Union and all that stuff. But tell me a little bit about equity in pay, like female teachers being, paid the same as their male counterparts.
Well, I mean, for teachers across this country, it'd be great if we can increase the salary regardless of the gender. I mean, as we're looking at very few teachers going into the traditional higher education programs because they're coming out with so much debt. The pay isn't as high as, say, if you were, working in a private corporation somewhere. Sure. But I'm in favor of making sure our teachers, regardless of gender, are well compensated. It's a great way to attract the best people to the profession. We really need to keep an eye on what the trend is, seeing not as many people going through the traditional higher education program for teaching.
But yes, I hear what you're saying, Rep. Fenton, but have you looked at any of the pay and equity issues? Like, have you looked at some of the studies that show female teachers are getting paid less? So
not recently, because many of the teachers all start out at the same.
Sure, right.
They're starting at the same, regardless of gender, but many districts may have merit pay and other step programs, and people are moving up through the steps differently. So I haven't looked at that lately.
Okay, sure. So, obviously, you've done a lot of work on the education front, trying to help teachers. How do you feel about Betsy DeVos and kind of the whole, wanting to look at public education and think about, how we can replace it with school choice and things like that? How do you feel about that? You were a public school teacher, I take it. Yeah.
So I was a public school teacher, but I'm also a parent. I'm a mother of 3 children, and I got to tell you, they all 3 learned differently. And I'm a proponent of parents having access to the best school that fits their child. Now, our public schools do a great job for many of our students. I'm a parent who had one child that didn't do so well under the public school programs and needed something a little bit smaller class sizes and whatnot. So we sent her to a private school. It happened to work great for her. Our 2 boys did excellent at the public school. Yeah. So I think what we need to understand is that we not one size doesn't fit everybody, and we need to make sure that we have options for parents to find the best fit for their child. I mean, you've got public schools, you've got charter schools, you have private schools, parochial schools. But I am a proponent of finding a way that a parent can find the best fit for their child.
Sure. Well, you live in an interesting district because it's not quite a fully safe district for a Republican or a Democrat. I don't know if it's switched once or twice since in the last decade or so, but you might know.
So, it's interesting because I'm the only Republican out of the 3 legislators that represent the district.
Yeah, it's a pretty moderate area. Yeah.
And so definitely the Senate seat is definitely swing. For the last several cycles, a Republican has won my side of the district. A Democrat has always won the other side of the district. The Senate seat, Senator Kent won by less than 400 votes. Yeah. So, but I always campaign as if I'm 10 points behind.
Yeah.
It was not that long ago that the seat did switch every few years.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, do you find that it puts you in a unique position? Do you hear from constituents on both sides of issues and try to have to balance that, like somebody, say, Senator Abler, who kind of has to do that in his district as well?
Absolutely. I mean, I ran with the understanding that if I win, I represent everybody,
Yeah,
not just the people who voted for me. Now, in the last election cycle, I was challenged from the right and from the left, which told me I legislated exactly where I should, which is down the middle.
Yeah.
Not all of the things that I carry has the bipartisan support, but much of what I bring forth does have bipartisan support. Mm-hmm. I work with my members across the aisle and support some of their initiatives, but I also work really well with my Democrat counterparts who also represent Woodbury. Yeah. And together the 3 of us have done a great job of always working closely with our county elected officials, with our city elected officials. Yeah. I think that is the most important thing that we can do as a legislator.
Yeah. You ever get into trouble?
Say that again?
You ever get into trouble having to walk that line?
I hear from
you'll get yelled at by your leadership.
I got in trouble. I get in trouble by the base, right?
Yeah, sure.
So like I said, there were some measures that I championed in my first term that somebody from the right challenged me. Mm-hmm. So, I will say our leadership is very understanding that many of our members need to legislate their district.
Yeah.
And so that's always nice to have that kind of understanding.
Yeah, it's interesting. All right, so we talked about licensure. We talked a little bit about the bill you introduced with the police involved there. Let's talk a little bit about one of the big issues that's come up lately, because you as an educator would affect, and you were a school teacher in Texas, so this might have different bearing on you, but a couple of bills were introduced up here recently. I know Dave Pinto introduced a couple of bills that got shot down and tabled right away, but Florida just recently introduced and passed legislation to arm teachers. How do you feel about bringing like that kind of legislation up here, and what do you think the reaction would be in general?
Well,
what's your position on it?
I don't think that arming teachers, I think that all options are on the table. We need to thoroughly look at all options.
Even arming teachers?
So arming teachers, for that to be a mandate, I don't think is a great idea, because not everybody is comfortable and not everybody, is trained in gun ownership. I will tell you that currently in Minnesota, it is happening. If a teacher is a concealed carry permit holder, they can get special permission from the superintendent or someone of authority to carry in the classroom if they want. So it is already happening to very, very small degree here in Minnesota.
What's the percentage? We don't know. Huh?
Right. So for it to be a mandate, I'm not necessarily in favor of, because not everybody is comfortable owning or even shooting a gun.
Yeah. Beyond that, do you see any danger inherent in that, or do you have any concerns that way?
Like I said, you need. I don't care who, I mean,
Yeah.
in or outside the classroom, people need to be law-abiding citizens. They need to be well-trained. I think there's some other measures that we should look at for school safety, school security improvements.
Yeah, what are some of those ideas?
Well, so, for example, there was a bill that was heard today in Education Finance. Back in 2015, we passed a new funding revenue for schools, the long-term facility maintenance revenue, which would allow schools to have a little bit of local control in using the money to improve their facilities how they need it.
Yeah.
So there's a bill today look to expanding that funding revenue to include any type of security measure a school may think they need, whether it be some sort of communication alert system, automatic alert system, whether it be locking front doors, putting those types of mechanisms in to have, buzz-in front doors, not allowing just anybody through, those types of things. So that bill was heard today in Education Finance. I think, again, every school district's need may be a little bit different. Some of the schools already have like the security provisions where you've got to go and buzz in and then you got to sign in, you're stopping at somebody before you go into the building. So it gives local control so that those school districts can invest in the improvements that they feel would best suit their own needs. So I think that was a great, I was voted for it in 2015. It was a great revenue stream, and now being able to use it for these types of measures, I think is also great. Another thing that we invested in, we've doubled our investment, is school-linked mental health grants. So we're investing more in the mental health issues for school-age children. That's very important. I think the younger you can intervene with these children is very important. Those types of measures that we've seen in the past and we're seeing coming up right now, right here, like we did today.
Yeah. Well, what are your thoughts about the systemic reasons for this violence? Do you have any idea why you think it's happening, or why you might imagine a kid grabs a gun and goes and just, shoots these people?
Well, you used the term accurately. The situation in Florida, there was a systemic failure on this child, and I think it was all the way around. I mean, I think from the school, from not having a parent to being a foster child to law enforcement and not heeding the concerns, just all the way around. I think we really need to take a good long look at what is happening, but also, this again is where these school-linked mental health grants are just valuable, is really intervening early on in school. I mean, our children, as a teacher, I probably spent more hours with some of my classroom children than than the parents themselves, right? Yeah. They're in school all day and they go home and they're hungry. The parents are coming home from work as well. They're eating dinner, they're doing homework, they're going to bed. Yeah. So the more that we could look at how can we intervene earlier on for these children would also be very helpful.
Yeah. Like when it comes to measures to introduce some kind of legislation to control like an assault weapon ban or things like that, what's your position on things like that right now? Like if you saw the bills that Pinto introduced, how did you feel about those? What was your reaction? I mean, I know you're not on the committee, you didn't vote, but I'd still like to know what your thoughts are.
So I'm not on the committee, and I think we really need to go deep into our Minnesota statutes, because Minnesota has some of the more stricter laws, and we really, I think, ourselves as legislators, I think the general public needs to have a very good understanding of what currently is in law that is already not allowed. I think also, we need to make sure we invest in those people who are enforcing the laws. Our laws need to be enforced. And if it means that those who enforce the law maybe need more revenue, more bodies to be there working, enforcing these laws, we really need to look at that before we add laws on top. But so much is actually already embedded as not allowed in Minnesota statutes.
Yeah.
But we really need to help those who are enforcing them to do just that and enforce our laws.
So just to summarize, you think that basically strengthening the existing laws would help reduce gun violence or the potential for it in the state?
So we need to enforce our existing laws,
Sure.
absolutely.
Oh, yeah. What did you think about, though, specifically like an enhanced background check and things like this? Would you be in favor of something like that if it that everybody has to go through a background check, even a private sale?
In the state of Minnesota, it's my understanding that we already have the background check, and even at double levels, there's a state background check, but there's also federal.
I think that's if you buy it from a shop, but like private, there's some loopholes there. Like
and so I think we need to carefully look, and I'm all
You'd
about.
be open to that?
I'm open. All discussion is on the table. I'm
Sure.
absolutely open to looking at everything.
Yeah, well, good.
Yeah.
Tell maybe listeners or viewers would be interested to hear a little bit about some of the difference between Texas, schoolhouse and. Because I also grew up in the South. It's a little different. So what are the differences between like a Texas second grade class and a Minnesota second grade class in your mind? I mean, you didn't teach up here, but what you've observed.
It's been so long, and it's been so long since I've been in the classroom. Mm-hmm. When I moved from the state of Texas and moved up here, I did teach second grade here.
Oh, you did? Okay. Yeah.
And frankly, kids are kids.
Yeah, sure.
There are more similarities than not.
Yeah.
So, I think the only difference I'd say would be the outdoor recess in winter.
Sure, right.
Takes a lot longer to get all your winter gear on. I mean, in Texas, you're like, all right,
we're out. Yeah.
Recess, go ahead. Who can make it to the door first? But here it's like, all right, who can get their snowsuit on? And don't forget your hats and your mittens. That was the biggest shock to me is just all the layers of clothing. And then it seems like as soon as kids get all dressed, they get out to recess, and it's time to come back in and take all that stuff off. So that was one of the biggest, believe it or not, biggest shocks. But kids are kids. They, many learn the same. Some are different. I'd say kids are kids, and from that aspect of the classroom, similar.
Maybe a few less pickup trucks in the lot picking up the kids at the end of the day.
They still have all their SUVs though here.
Yeah,
right.
True,
But you got the big all-wheel drive vehicles here. So even in that respect.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to wrap up with a couple of questions. What's the coolest thing you think there is about being like a legislator up here at the Capitol? What's the one coolest thing you like?
So is this before or after
Besides
I meet
Chelsea, obviously.
Well, I mean, one of the coolest things would be just all the great people you get to meet, right?
Right.
But let's take that out because I love people no matter where I go.
Yeah.
But here's one thing that I never thought of when I ran. And the first day after winning, they have you here and they have this big bipartisan orientation.
Right.
The first thing they said is, congratulations, you are all now officially a part of Minnesota history.
Yeah.
I never thought about that. I wanted to go. I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to help people. So when you go in and you actually get to push the red and green button on the House floor, I gotta say that was pretty cool. But first and foremost, I just love meeting the people.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, well, that's good. And then we like to ask legislators, regardless of party affiliation, talk about one person on the other side of the aisle that you really enjoy working with and who you think is doing a good job representing Minnesota values.
I love working with Cheryl Joachim, and we actually because our training and our freshman retreat here is bipartisan, we get to actually know the members of our freshman class from the other side of the aisle. And she and I will go to lunch together. You know, we organize bipartisan happy hours for all of our other members together. I really enjoy working with her. And
one person you just can't stand and you hate so really bad. No, I'm just kidding. I won't really ask you that.
Nobody.
I won't ask it. We don't really ask that question. Okay. No, but people are surprised to hear that people actually get along up here because the media likes to report. You know, the conflicts are what makes the news and all that stuff. But there's really a lot of hard work that goes on between legislators from different ideological backgrounds and party affiliations.
You're absolutely correct. And if you're watching from home and you're watching on the TV, you're just seeing these clips going back and forth. And I always tell people what I wish everybody could see is what happens in the retiring room. Right. We're sharing a meal together, we're talking, we're laughing, we're hugging. I mean, we get along really well. Yeah. And so I wish everybody could see that, but they don't because that's not covered on the TV cameras.
Yeah, it's not as fun to show that, I guess, or what have you. So beyond like your legislative duties during session, what occupies your time outside of the legislature? What do you like to do? I know you got 3 kids and Doug is your husband at home, right? Is that Greg? I'm sorry. Yep. Apologies to you, Greg. Doug has nothing to do with this. I don't know Doug. If there
by the way, Greg really does exist.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think so. I mean, he's officially in the book, in the guide, as your spouse. So.
Yes.
Yeah, so I didn't think you'd put Doug in there if it was Greg. My bad.
Nope, that's all right. It's interesting because we're now empty nesters.
Okay.
So my youngest is now at college. One thing I did love is always going to visit my kids at school. I just got back, went to get to spend the weekend with my daughter for her mother-daughter weekend at her school.
Sure.
But I'm a huge dog lover, so love spending time with my dog when the weather's great. I love hanging out at the dog park with my dogs. Unfortunately, we just had to say goodbye to one. It was really devastating to me because she was so young.
Yeah,
but
they're like family.
They are. They're like family. But, so, and then if I can, I volunteer in my community. I was before I got elected, I volunteered for Faith Formation at our church. I just love being an active community member.
Yeah. You mentioned your kids are grown. And I'm going to ask you a personal question.
Okay.
You don't have to answer it if you don't want to. Are they all Republicans? Or do you think they lean Democrat? Is there any? Because, I got 4 kids. I know how this works. So.
My kids are all Republican.
Are they? Okay.
Yeah, they know where the gravy train is.
I see.
No.
Okay.
No,
interesting.
Currently, they're all Republicans.
Sure, yeah.
So, at least when they vote for me.
Right. Well,
they all vote for me. I know that for sure.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
You have to vote for your mom, right?
Absolutely.
Regardless.
Absolutely.
My dad's a Republican. If he ran, I guess I can't say I'd vote for him or not. But.
So what is interesting, though, about that is that I was raised in a mixed, my dad was a Democrat.
Sure.
My mom was a Republican, which I think is why I'm not fearful of extending a hand across the aisle. I was raised with a lot of thoughtful conversation in the household. Yeah. Although my dad did always know my mother was always right while she was in the room.
That's a secret to a long marriage.
Yeah, right?
I hear you. All right. Well, thank you very much, Representative Fenton. I really appreciate you coming down, spending a little time with us, and sharing your, thoughts about this legislative session. I wish you the best success and good luck.
Thank you so much. My pleasure.
You bet. All right. Well, that's it. We have any questions? I should have asked you, Katie, because sometimes on Facebook Live they'll ask direct questions. But I think that's all we have time for tonight. Katie is our producer. Thanks for your help on Facebook and the camera tonight. Thanks to Chelsea, who has been kind enough to help coordinate. And she's here. We could just show her, but she doesn't want to be on camera. But thanks a lot. And again, thank you, Representative Fenton, and good luck.
Thank you very much.
This is Marty Owings. So long for now from the Capitol. We'll see you next week.